cheating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. We have an exciting episode today. We're going to be talking with Nicholas. He's going to be going over his take on the new Eldar codex, specifically the Ynnead detachment, and what he is looking forward to running it as a previously Drukhari only specialist. And we're gonna talk about what he was running back when that was what his flavor of the month was. Real quick, toss it over to Phil. Phil, what are some other things we can expect today?
A definite faction specialist, someone that is well respected in the Drukhari community. He works incredibly hard in his craft, and he's only done so for about a year. So he is definitely new to the competitive scene, but has already put out some incredible results. The most recent being in the K Fight Club Open, over 100 players, and he made it to the final table, going 5-1 with Drukhari, when others just saw it as, not necessarily the greatest of detachment, but with the tools and tricks and player skill, he has definitely brought this detachment along the lines of Cody Jiru and Skari in a place where it's like, no, you have to be concerned about this detachment. You have to be scared of the things they do. And in the hands of a good player, they can definitely be effective. But this new Eldar detachment, it is the talk of the town, unfortunately overshadowing slightly the Imperial Guard detachment lane. I'm sorry. But if I'm going to be looking across the table, I'm definitely more scared of this Eldar codex than I am the Imperial Guard one. And we brought on a faction specialist, Nick, to talk about one detachment in particular, which is, without a better term, devoted to Drukhari, because Ynnead is, it's a thing, but we're devoted to Drukhari here, and Nick is definitely encompassing that. So, Nick, why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown about this detachment, about this codex, and the tools and tricks that players should be looking out for?
Yeah, so this is a fun one. This Ynnead detachment is interesting for the Eldar Codex. I guess I should first start off with the restrictions, because if you're going to be playing this, you have to know that, and if you're playing against it, you have to know the restrictions that are in place. If you run into this attachment, you have to take your Vrain or Ynnead as your warlord. That's just like rule number one. And if you take one of those two in the data sheet, it literally says you're not allowed to take any other epic heroes. So once you take this attachment, you're locked into, your Vrain and Ynnead, and then no other Phoenix Lords, that's a big ask when the new Phoenix Lords are pretty good. They're all really, really good. The new aspect warriors with the shrine tokens are all really good when the lords are with them. The combos you can make with some of them, with like Fragan and the Fire Dragons, Azure Man with the Dire Avengers, they're really good. So you have to really love Drukhari or the Ynnead and just like combining those type of units to run this attachment, because you have to take into account the restrictions. You're also not allowed to put Eldar units inside of the Eldar transports. All the Eldar transports have a restriction saying they cannot take Ynnead units, and when you take this attachment, every single one of your Eldar units gets the Ynnead keyword, and that allows you to use all the stratagems and detachment rules. So that's how that works. But then like I said, you just can't put your Fire Dragons, Dire Avengers inside of Wave Serpents and Falcons. So you're foot slogging all the Eldar stuff, which is okay when this attachment gives you a bunch of really cool movement tech and movement tricks to leverage your units. And in even the new Eldar Army rule, you get these 4 battle tokens, battle focus tokens, that you can use for essentially, there's 6 movement stratagems. I like to call them basically 6 movement stratagems. You get these 4 tokens that you can leverage these 6 movement tech stratagems. Every battle round, you lose the tokens at the end of the round. You get them back at the start of the next phase. GW wants you to be using them throughout each battle round. You don't want to be sitting on them. Yeah, so a lot of good movement tech stuff. I guess I'll go over the army rule real quick. So those 4 tokens allow you to do some cool stuff. 2 of them are reactionary moves out of the 6. One of them is if you get shot, you can make a d6 plus 1 reactionary move if it's not Titanic. So that's really good. That even means your transports, even the Eldar transport, or sorry, the Drukhari transports, like my Raider, stuff along those lines. Could do fun little things like that. Wraith Lords, Ynnead, really cool. So d6 reactionary move, or d6 plus 1, sorry, after you get shot. The other reactionary move is, and if the enemy falls back, I can make a d6 plus 1 reactionary move. Not into combat with them again. I could just make a d6 plus 1 reactionary move after the enemy falls back. So I can run away if I think they're going to shoot at me, go behind a wall with an infantry unit, or I can pressure them and move up towards them, because there is a fun little play in this detachment that you can make with that combo that I'll go into. But I'll just talk about the army rule real quick. And then, so those are the 2 reactionary ones. And then the 4 other ones there's 2 just bonus movement tech ones where you can just add extra movement to your models. The first one is +2 movement to any non-vehicle. So yeah, your infantry, your walkers, your monsters, just +2 movement to them whenever they make a normal advanced fallback move. That's really good. You can use that one multiple times in the same phase as long as it's different units, and that's the only one they can use multiple times. I forgot to say that originally. All the other ones have the caveat once per phase. Um, and then the other one is if it's a vehicle, you can give it D6 +1 extra movement. So that's really cool. My detachment, it's cool on, I guess, my raider if I wanted to shoot the raider up, but then I can't really give it assault ramp to disembark my incubi. But in other detachments, this is just the flat army rule. So if you're playing aspect host for Eldar, you have to watch out. They can just fly a wave serpent 14 plus D6 +1 inches, drop out Azure Man and some Dire Avengers, blast into something, and then jump back into that Falcon for free. Or not for free, but whatever the aspect host. They have ways to jump back into their transport. So in the other Eldar detachments, that specific one, giving their transports D6 +1 movement and then dropping out Fire Dragons, Dire Avengers, that's a crazy threat range.
Yeah, and what if I wanna shoot them as they get out? Would I just be able to do that, or
no?
Yeah,
even better, because you still have 2 more of those movement tokens to use. One of them being whenever my unit is set up, moves, or whatever the case is, I can give it it can't be overwatched, of course. So for elves, that was always one of the biggest weaknesses of elves. With T3, outside of Wraith Lords and the vehicles and stuff like that, when we want to commit our infantry, we have to always be careful of Overwatch. It's very easy to pick us up with Flamers. Now, our very important units, like a Fire Dragon trying to 10-man Fire Dragon, you're trying to blow up Silent King or something with Reagan leading them, they can just pop out with the safety of not being overwatched by something around it, which is really, really strong to just get those key targets where they need to be, score missions, to just deny enemy scoring points, whatever the case is. We know strong no overwatches. And then the last one is in the fight phase, you can give one unit 6 inches to their pile-in and consolidate. So normally 3 inches, then they could just do 6 inches pile-in, 6 inches consolidate. That's pretty cool on something like the Ynnead who can TP around the map to my dead models and then still have activations to pile in and stuff like that. We'll get into that as well. But yeah, so those are all 6 of them. They're very good army rule in my opinion. I think movement, being able to abuse movement in 40k is very strong in the right hands. And now Eldar just can get 4 tokens to just abuse movement whatever they want. And that's not even counting their CP. Like I said, this is just 4 battle focused tokens. So they still have their stratagems getting CP that also some of them do abuse movement attacks, some of them, whatever the case is. But typically they can just dump their CP into damage boosting stuff now, which is most armies have to make the choice. I will like my Drukhari, I have to decide to spend a CP to advance and charge my unit or give my unit lethal hits and sustained hits. That's a tough choice when I only have very limited CP and I can't even regen CP in my Drukhari army. So yeah, I think this army rule is pretty strong. Yeah, and I think people have to watch out for it. It's going to be a little tricky at first because you're going to have to remember these 6 extra movement tech things that all Eldar players can do at all times. But, after a couple of reps, people will realize and start understanding how to play around those army rules a little bit.
Yeah, and I just got to go back and address what Phil said, throwing that shade that Gar just isn't really worth talking about, and we will get to it, but he is right. I mean, I look like the most vanilla bean ass army that you have seen when you put it right next to just the entire triple flavor blizzard that is the Eldar Codex that just has everything you could ever want. I mean, I do have to agree.
This Eldar army rule it's very different than all the other ones for sure. I mean, most army rules are my Drukhari, I guess just a little bit more straightforward, but this one is very unique. You get these extra tokens and then, these 6 extra basically mini stratagems you have to pay attention to and use. It's interesting for sure.
We have seen mechanics like this before, right, in the past, in terms of unique activations within an army. The ones that come to mind in terms of baseline, not to this level, is Black Templars in terms of their oaths, right? They can select different oaths. Those have a little bit of benefit, but not like this. Not like constantly being able to adjust as the game is going on.
Yeah, very reactionary.
Yeah, very reactionary, and it's each turn reactionary versus the oaths, which are obviously a little bit different. You also have fate tokens, or fate dice, as well as
well, not anymore.
Yeah, what I'm saying is in the past we've seen rules
sorry, in the past, yeah, correct. That was one of the ways to abuse stuff.
Fate dice. We've seen rules like Tzeentch dice,
yes.
And then now with the new Tzeentch or Tzeentch demons, right? That transfer of those tempting dice of
that one's also very interesting. Then we're getting some. I think it's a very cool, fun time to be playing. To be honest, I think we have these really interesting detachments that interact with each other in cool, fun ways that are yeah, shaking things up a lot for sure.
Definitely thematic. Like, it
Yeah,
definitely feels
and that
like
too. Flavorful, thematic. Yeah, it feels cool. Yep.
now there are some armies that are lagging behind, right? Like, um, that like I mean the artillery detachment I think is really unique and flavorful for IG. Is it the most competitive thing in the world? We'll have to see. I think there's IG has some really good units
Oh
overall
yeah,
that
yeah.
are incredibly effective. I think we're gonna find like these detachments that have these very unique, flavorful rules that are very competitive. Like they might outclass the armies that haven't gotten that codex and that buff yet. So um, we
It's just a
will see.
lot of detachments in the game too now. That's the thing. It's like we got all the Grotmus ones. Now we just got the Elder one, which is what, 8? How many does the Elder one have? 9, if you count the Grotmus one for Elder, crazy. And then Guard is about to get their codex. We just have a lot of detachments in the game to keep track of. And, you go to an event and you just run into so many different archetypes and playstyles and stuff now. It's actually difficult to get proper reps into everything, if that makes sense. It's really hard to just have proper reps into everything. There's just a lot out there right now.
Yeah, the available detachments basically doubled since the start of December now.
Literally crazy.
But we're here to talk about the couple specifically that you have been playing.
Absolutely.
Let's we've went over kind of what the Eldar rule is. Let's dive on into what the Ynnead detachment specifically does and why we think it has an even higher skill expression because of some of those extra rules within it that really are going to make it tough for people to deal with.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the detachment rule because this one right away is a three-parter. So there's a little bit going on here. The detachment rule gives you two extra movements one extra movement. One of them changes one of the agile moves, and then the third one gives you unit fights first. So let's just go into the first one. Lethal intent. At the end of the opponent's shooting phase, if one or more Ynnead units was destroyed this phase, I can make a normal move with one of my other units. So that's very strong. This one initially is the core of the whole detachment. The other ones let you get very creative with comboing a couple of things. But this one alone, like in 40k, there's a shooting phase, obviously, and people have to leverage that. Or some armies are just all about the shooting phase. Tau, Guard are very much about shooting. The new Ultramarine Iron Storm is like pretty much all in on shooting, a little bit with Calgar. But my point is that like if you're gonna shoot into elves, we're not that durable. We're T3 elves. In this attachment, you wanna run MSU because if I lose a full unit, I get to make a full another move with another unit. Just getting a second move with another unit is really strong. You're done shooting with all my stuff. I get to move a full raider full of incubi, 14 inches or whatever, 14 inches, and then the next turn I could just disembark them 3 inches and go wherever I need to. Or a really strong, and what I've been doing recently, I got a couple of test games with this specific attachment is a good player can leverage all of, like, I'll throw a 65 point MSU, like, Reaver unit of bikes onto an objective, or like 95 point spiders onto an objective after I flip it or something. Now you have to decide if you want to charge into that unit, which I have fights first stuff around and all that jazz, or you want to shoot into them, which is fine. Like most armies will shoot into a 95 point unit and kill 5 spiders. That's like easy for like a lot of armies in the game, and that's like a no-brainer play. Against this list though, you kill that unit. If I position my guys correctly, where I position my other spiders 12 inches away from that main objective, I position a couple of incubi 9 inches away from that objective, I can just move a full other unit of, you just kill that unit and I'm making another spider unit moving 12 inches onto that objective, and I didn't lose that unit on that objective, if that makes sense. So the opponent has to think of these scenarios where, and it's not just you kill my one unit and now like you kill my spider unit and I'm allowed to move my other spider unit. It's like, no, I get to move any one of my units in my army. So the opponent has to sit there and be like, wow, okay, let me shoot that one little unit somewhere. Let me shoot that unit in front of me. Anytime the opponent wants to shoot something in their turn, they have to think about like, oh, if I kill that unit, any one of my opponent's units can make another move. So your opponent's movement phase they have to be thinking in their movement phase before they even get to their shooting phase how they want to line up their shooting, because they have to think about like me potentially making another move somewhere, or if they like line up a charge to get into one of my units, they kill something in the distance shooting. I could just normal move that unit away from the charge that you just like lined up, and now you're just not going to make your charge, or you have to like think about lining up multiple charges. I mean, I can go into hours about the different plays that can line up with this one thing, but you can see how just getting an extra movement at the end of the shooting phase is just very strong. And then it forces the opponent to really think about how they want to go about shooting. Yeah, it's just as simple as that. Like the opponent's shooting phase becomes very difficult just because of that one move alone.
All right, and let's say that you decide to just go stand on an objective, and you don't have something that can move to go hold it, but I can't contest it either. Let's say in those scenarios nothing else can move on there. I can just shoot you off, right? That should be a good
Yeah,
answer.
you want to deny me a primary like most people, like kill the five guys on the point, and then I don't have anything on the point. Well, this attachment has a really strong stratagem called Palo Dread for 1 CP. In any phase, if one of my Ynnead units dies, I can just sticky the objective. So it's like the Khorne. I think Khorne has what am I saying? Khorne World Eaters. I believe they have a stratagem similar to this where they can sticky when one of their units dies. I'm not exactly sure if theirs works in the shooting phase. I have to confirm that. But regardless, there's like a 2-for-1 here because now you have to decide if you're gonna it becomes doubly bad to shoot into me if that makes sense. Because if I'm on the objective, especially one, I can sticky it if you kill me, which is great because now I just sticky it. I didn't even have to stay alive into my turn, which is tough for elves to do. Normally, to stick an objective, it's pretty difficult for an elf army to just like sit out in the open and stay alive on an objective. Um, but after that, I can sticky it, still score my points, and then I can now stage another unit to hit you in a key spot, flip another objective that you might have put stuff onto, whatever the case is. Oh, like you put 5 guys in the middle objective and you shot my guy on my natural objective. I'm going to sticky my natural and throw, I don't know, 6 incubi with fights first onto the middle objective. And now your shooting phase is done. And you have to decide if you want to charge into my fights first incubi break on that middle objective with your guys that you just thought you had. It's all these scenarios that could come up, but your opponent has to be really thinking about them. And that's tough. That's going to be there's a lot of lines of play that can happen. Yeah, that sticky on the enemy turn plus this lethal intent makes it really difficult for the opponent to shoot into this army cleanly. You can do it, obviously. You can shoot into them and whatever. You can kill multiple of our units a turn. Indirect will blast through our MSU stuff, but we will get a couple of free movements, and you're going to have to kill a lot of our units before we can score enough points, if that makes sense. So yeah, so that's the combo of Lethal Intent and the Pile of Dread. The next one is Lethal Surge. This is the attachment rule still, because you get 3 of them. Once per turn. So I mentioned before, when you get shot at in the army rule, we can spend one of our tokens to make a reactionary D6+1 move. In this attachment, I'm allowed to end an engagement range with the unit that shot at me with that agile reactionary move. So you shoot into me, I can roll D6+1, and I can end an engagement range with the unit that shot at me. Once per turn in this attachment. Normally, any other elf detachment, when they make their reactionary D6+1 move, they cannot end an engagement range. They just have to go wherever they want. In this attachment can end engagement range. So, my Ynnead is like right in your face. You want to shoot some wounds into it, I can just roll D6+1, roll a 6, I'm moving 7 inches into engagement range with whatever shot into me. And if you did any wound damage to me, it gets even more fun because the next rule we have is called Lethal Reprisal, where at the start of the fight phase, I can select one unit in my army that's below starting strength, so the one that you just shot at that just moved into engagement range with you, and I can give that unit fights first. So that's the 3 rules. We get the free move at the end of the opponent's shooting phase if they kill something. We can end an engagement range if they shoot at us with a D6+1 move if it's the unit that shot us. And we can also give any single unit fights first if it's under starting strength. And fights first is like, people have to pay for a character, like 70 points, 80 points, add a character to a unit to get them fights first. Or an enhancement onto a character, Fights first isn't, it's pretty hard to come by sometimes, so just give it out. And I could just, under starting strength, just give it to a unit as long as it's not Titanic. Ynnead, Wraith Lords, Incubi Brick, a transport if I really wanted to, but I could just give a unit fights first. Yeah, so that's the 3 detachment. That's the 3 rules of the detachment. It's a combo.
I love those. In
They're
terms of
very good.
play, like in terms of the things that you have to think about as a player,
Yeah,
like it makes me want to run that detachment. It does.
that's what I think it really lets a good player truly express their skill level. And it forces the other player. If you don't have a lot of reps into this, it's going to be, if the opponent's putting you on the clock, I'm telling you, it's going to be really hard in your shooting phase to make clean plays where the opponent's not making a free move at the end of your turn. They're not making a D6+1 reactionary move into engagement range with you. They're not activating fights first with a unit on the side that you just clipped into because you didn't do enough damage with your volley that you thought was going to kill them. There's all these what ifs, if that makes sense. In a dice game of variables, that's really hard to weigh your options and be like, what is my best play when I don't know if I'm going to actually kill that unit. I don't know if I'm going to fully wipe it. I don't know if he's going to roll a 5 on his reactionary move to get behind cover or be in my face in engagement range.
Yeah. Yeah, I know personally, we've been talking about this now. It's been out for a couple of weeks. I've been, as a guard player, trying to find ways to deal with this. And the only way I know how to deal with it is I need to go put a 10-man of guardsmen or equivalent on that objective, so I have enough OC that even if you move something on with Eldar, you shouldn't out OC me to hold it on your turn. I know I can't charge you with them, because then you'll just kill them.
Correct, 100%. And that actually, that's why I love this attachment so much, because in my mind, I've been thinking about it too, and I do think that is the right play, because you have to try to score the points. If you don't put those 10 guys there, I'm either sticking it or I'm going to still score it on my turn. The issue is you just threw those 10 guys there that basically did nothing but just sit on the point to maybe deny it, and now I'm just going to throw 5 warp spiders out there and literally flame you with 66 warp spiders and my 3 other indirect stuff. Like, I'm going to kill that 10-man, no problems, because you had to commit a 10-man chaff unit just to deny me a point, and now it's forcing the opponent to just commit stuff onto the middle of the field where that's easy for me to make charges, easy for me to flicker and walk onto. Like, you just have to commit stuff. And if you don't have enough stuff, I'm going to just win that trade game, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and it doesn't feel good. That's the only answer I have to stopping you from scoring primary, and that doesn't still help me with the problem of you yeeting, a Drukhari boat halfway up the board to just dump itself out in my backline. So that is handling one of the problems this poses. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, like, especially as a guard army, like, yeah, you're going to put the 10 guys out there, but you can't just drop guys onto points for 5 turns and not shoot all game. You can't. Like, I'm just going to kill you if you just don't shoot me all game. So you have to actually shoot, but your army is not that good at melee, so, like, you have to actually shoot at some point in the game, which is going to eventually probably allow me to get some sneaky plays off that, like you said, get a boat into your back line, or, like, move the incarnate to a spot that you don't want, or, like, get fire drag, because now you're done shooting. It's at the end of the opponent's shooting phase. So now I'm comfortable just throwing my fire dragon unit out from behind ruins into the middle of the board, so I can move them 9+1, like 9+ in advance next turn, because you're not going to shoot me anymore with them, or as long as it's not in chargeable range of something. It allows me to throw this MSU infantry units where, we talked about, like, me losing the ability to put my fire dragons in transport. Sure, that sucks, but at some point my opponent has to shoot into me, and if I play my fire dragons correctly, I'll just be able to lethal intent one of them when you're done shooting, and now one of them will be in the middle of the board to be able to leverage next turn, and I can just, like, slowly get that, train going.
So interesting, right? Like, this for our viewers, this might lead to a couple feels bad moments, because I will say, from, like, a competitive player's perspective, that player's only going to be able to tell you so many times, hey, don't forget, if you kill a unit, like, I'm going to move here, or right, I have the capabilities to move this raider 14 inches, like, and
at a certain, yeah, like, you have to tell them that you can make these plays, but me lining up my raider to get a 14-inch move so I can get into your backline, that's a play I need to make to win sometimes, if that makes sense. And I can't just, like, fully telegraph it, like, I'm trying to win still. I have to tell them that, yeah, if you kill one of my units, I can make a move, but I can't, like, there's going to be feel bad moments where they're going to be like, oh my god, I forgot you could do the raider. It's like, yeah, well, I said, like, any unit can make the move, it's going to be, like, moments like that where it's going to be like, yeah, it's any unit in my army, I can't just be like, hey, I could have moved that raider over there, you should have just not shot this. Like, I can't telegraph every single play, because, like, that's the whole point of attachments, that, like, it really needs to force the opponent to, like, make the right decision. You can't just be telling them, hey, this is the best unit to shoot, so that I can't, like, move my unit into your back line. So something like that, yeah.
For our viewers, right? Like, you're gonna be like, oh, that's a gotcha. That's a moment, and it's like, no. Let's be clear here.
Exactly.
Like, Nicholas playing this army, what he will do, and I've seen him play and played against him so many times, right? It's gonna be one of those things where he will say, hey, I can move any unit in my army. If you kill something, I can move them their normal move, and then can you stack the token on top of that as well?
Yes, that's why, because it's whenever you select the unit to make a normal move.
Correct. So
you can go, like, the 9 inches, or, like, the transport can go d6+1.
I'm gonna do a normal move, and potentially I can stack it with.
Correct, you have to elect them, yeah.
Right? And I could do that with any unit. And
also, you have to let the opponent know about intent too. Like, if I'm, if I'm lining, especially with the objective stuff, like me lining my transport to go 14 against your backline, that's something. But I have to tell my opponent, hey, I'm moving these guys 12 inches away from this objective because they have a 12-inch move, so that if you kill one of my units, I'm going to put all 5 of these guys onto that objective with a lethal intent move, if that makes sense.
Correct. And that intent is super important. So you as a player...
And the move's called lethal intent. You should be really good with this and telling your opponents what you're trying to do. Not fully, but, like, really have the intent of, like, hey, so they don't be like, oh, you weren't 12 inches. Like, no, I mean, I told you I put these guys 12 away so I can get them 12 after that happens, blah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
super
So,
important, and I think it's going to be super important in this detachment specifically, that if you
oh
are
yeah,
playing it,
absolutely.
you need to be super clear. You
Yes,
need to be
exactly.
super apparent, like transparent about what you're doing and how you measure. We're going to have an episode later in the week that's going to talk about playing clean. This is one of
Yeah.
those armies that you have to play.
Absolutely, you really want it because like the opponent's gonna, you just have a lot of rules going on, and you don't want the like at the end of every single 40K game, the end goal is to like have the opponent want to play you again. At least that's what I always feel like. I want to always have a game where my opponent wants to play me again. That's just like the end game. We have a good time, and that's awesome. I do feel like this detachment probably will have some feel bad moments, but you really have to like you said, be transparent what's going on, let the opponent know about the different moves. It gets even crazier with the Yinkarn, because like the Yinkarn's one of the only models in the game. Like we're already breaking normal 40K order of operations with its attachment by like making moves in the end the opponent's shooting phase, reactionary moves after they shoot, fights first, breaking their charge operations if that makes sense. And now we have the Yinkarn, which is a model that just teleports across the board when one of my let me just tell her. So Yinkarn's rule is in the opponent's turn, when one of my units dies, I can choose to just teleport her to where the last like when I pick up the last model, I can teleport her to that last model as close as possible outside of engagement range. So it's a very crazy rule. Not many things in the game are just like teleporting anywhere on the board on the opponent's turn, if that makes sense. Usually you have to like pick up at the end of the opponent's turn, drop it on your turn 9 inches away, blah blah blah, all that stuff. So we already talked about how hard it is for the opponent to think about shooting just because of lethal intent and because of the Pale of Dread, where I can sticky, I can make a move after their shooting phase. Now, not only can I move after one of my units dies with any move unit in my army, if the Yinkarn is on the table, she could also just teleport there. So the opponent has to like really think about the order of operations. If they're lining up a couple of attacks into a unit and it's on a flank of the board and they started off with the weak guns, hit into it, went into the bigger guns and they killed it with the bigger guns and now they have no more shooting on that flank, I could just decide to TP the Incarn over there now, knowing that there's no more shooting. And I'm pretty comfortable in the fight phase with this army with like fights first and fight on death with the stratagem and stuff like that. So the opponent not only do you have to think about like, oh, one random unit can move a normal move at the end of the turn, the Yinkarn can teleport where a unit died, and then also she's allowed to just make that lethal intent move too. So she could just TP somewhere and then still just move as well. It's just like as the Ynnead player, there's a lot of lines of play that the Ynnead player has to think about. Like I'm not saying that it's just like super easy for the Ynnead player to just blow anyone out of the water. Like it's very easy for the Ynnead player to miss these lines of plays too, where they're just like not TPing the Yinkarn somewhere they need to, or like forgetting to do a reactionary move with the right unit, 'cause the only one unit can do it, or like making a normal move with a unit that normal move didn't do anything, if that makes sense. There's a lot of lines of plays for both players, but in the right hands, the opponent it's going to be really hard for the opponent to make the right play when the Yinkarn's TPing around, another random unit's making a move on that turn. Yeah, there's scenarios where you think like tank shock is really good because okay, if I can tank shock something, I can kill 5 spiders with like Lehman Russ tank shocking into 5 spiders. That's like not that bad. A bunch of dice, get a couple of fives, or like chip into them with a little bit and then like tank shock them down. Well, there's like scenarios where if you end up killing one of my because I'm running a bunch of 5-man MSU in this list. If you just kill like 5 of those MSU with a tank shock, the Yinkarn, if she's on the board, if I happen to, depending, if you did multiple charges that turn and you tank shocked one of them, and I was able to heroic intervention the Yinkarn somewhere, anytime the Yinkarn heroic interventions and the opponent charged multiple spots on the board, there's always a scenario where the opponent kills one of the side charged units before the Yinkarn activates because the Yinkarn heroic. So like the opponent does all their charges, tank shocks, all that stuff first. There's always a chance that like the tank shock and one of their random charges kills one of my MSU 5-mans. And now the Yinkarn, because she heroic intervention, she can TP to where my dead unit was, and she hasn't activated yet. So she can still pile in with that token to do a 6-inch pile in, 6-inch consolidate. It just gets very silly when the Yinkarn's on the board if she ever decides to heroic in somewhere. If you allow her to heroic in, like the opponent has to like normally heroics are like, okay, I'm just worrying about this like one little bubble. You heroic here, we're like it's happening in this one spot on the board. Well, if the Yinkarn heroics in and you multi-charge stuff on the board, the Yinkarn really could just break that whole interaction. Like I could have 5 spiders on a point, you charge in, you kill those 5 spiders, she heroics somewhere else. Well, now she can TP where those 5 spiders are onto that point still, pile in, and potentially kill what you just charged with and hold that point for me still, which is a crazy concept. Like, how's the opponent like holding a point somewhere completely, like the Incarn's not even where that objective was, and she's still like making a play on that objective on your turn. It's wild. It's just crazy.
I mean, if someone can pull off the absolute ultimate, because the Incarn, is it limited to a number of times you can teleport a game, or is it just
No,
any time?
Once per
Once
turn.
per turn. Oof,
Once
brutal.
per enemy turn. Like on your turn, you kill one of my units, you can TP, because I can never do it on my turn. But it's just, again, another layer of, like, every time you kill something, every time you decide to make a play into my units, you just have to think about that one extra layer of, like, what if, what could happen.
Oh man, and that you can't even, you have to be really aware of what you're going to kill and what you're going to charge, because he could even make that same play, teleport somewhere around the board. Might not be able to do another teleport as he was talking about in the fight phase, but he could go heroic into something that you were just planning to charge to tie up. There are all kinds of lines of play with this detachment, and it is just 3D chess compared to the checkers most of us are playing with our army rules. And whew, man, that's going to take some reps to get used to.
Yeah, like, I mean, just a very quick one too, because I can just show you like one quick little cool combo you can do with her. Like, shooting phase, I move block some spiders in front of your tank, because I don't want you to move your tank, for example. All right, so you shoot my tank, and now I can TP the Incarn there, because now you're done shooting there. Maybe you have another thing to shoot with. Even if you had one other big other gun, I'm fine with that, depending. And now if you want to shoot that one other gun into the Incarn, you have to be careful with that, because I can still do her reactionary move into engagement range on that side of the board now. And then she has fights first. So, like, that's just in the shooting phase. That's not even talking about, like, the heroic and TPing around. So, like, even in the shooting phase, she has the ability to get into combat with you, potentially. It's like crazy. She's really cool. I think her with these rules is like, you can get very creative with how you can combo her with these.
It's definitely, like, it feels nice. I know we've talked about it before, Nick. Like, that is like a centerpiece unit, and Drukhari traditionally haven't had, like, maybe you could call your Venoms or your
I would
Bomber.
say the Tantalus is kind of like our kind of, which of course is pouring salt into the wounds, but that was basically his unit that's yeeted gun.
Can't have any fun anymore.
I know, man. Drukhari, every time we catch a break, they just like slap us on the wrist. Stay down.
So it is a cool centerpiece unit. It does feel very thematic. Devoted Ynnead is like, it does feel a good combination of technically Eldar units and your Dark Eldar units and all that stuff. So it's like, man, that feels pretty good. Now,
feels pretty good, yeah.
If I were playing into you, right? Like, especially if I was taking GSC, it's definitely pressure. Like, I have to get into things, and you cannot play afraid of, like, oh, I'm going to trigger all these things. Like, a lot of the times those triggers will happen no matter what. Now, I can trade better than most armies, right? Like, my 5-mans are going to come back, maybe the 10-mans are going to come back. So those trades will be bad for the majority of players. And this is something we're going to talk about in later episodes in terms of, like, how to trade and the positive and negatives of it. But the one thing that you're going to catch players out for is you are almost forcing them, whether you go first or second, to initiate the trade, which is probably the worst part about it. They have to go out there preemptively prior to you initiating the trade, whether you go first or second, because the majority of the time, if you are going first, you have to initiate the trade because you are trying to go out there so you can score primaries on the second round. Now, you can be like, actually, I'm not going to go out there. I'm going first. And for where the majority of people struggle, especially going first, of having to initiate that trade, you no longer have to do that. Now, the person going second actually has to be the one to initiate that trade. So I'm very curious to see the go first versus go second win rate of Devoted Ynnead, because I feel like that discrepancy is going to be a lot smaller compared to the majority of detachments because of that simple fact that they will
100% agree,
they will almost never have to initiate a trade, and they are in a position where they are relatively safe. So if you have the ability
if I go first with the Ynnead detachment, like between the lethal intent move and the Pile of Dread, I throw something on my natural objective that's really cheap, like MSU, whatever, under 100 points. And I throw another MSU in the middle objective that's like 100 points, or a Wraithlord or something. And now I'm pretty much guaranteed, not 100%, that I'll score at least one of these objectives going into next turn, either by stickying, because the opponent probably can't make the full way to my natural objectives unless they wanted to charge it. Like, the only option for the opponent to stop both of them is to commit units onto it, which is not great if they're going second, because we already said, like, going second, you want to play KG, you don't want to commit too much, you want to play the trade game smartly. But if I'm forcing to make bad trades going first, like me going first, that's horrible for the second player. Um, yeah, it's a very interesting concept. It's most elf armies struggle going first because, like you said, unless you have a way to sticky an objective or maybe GL the opponent in with Drukhari with beast packs, that's a little bit different. But typically, it's tough for elf players to get a strong foothold going first.
Yeah, that is very fair. I think that's really going to help just overall give you more easy ways to score primary, be harder to get off of those objectives, which has definitely been, a thing for a glass cannon army that has been a problem. But now it doesn't seem quite as much of a problem because you are going to hand out punishments every time somebody does that. I think it at least adds that layer, and it's going to really depend on how well people can play into that style of play where you really have to be thinking about just how reactionary this army can be.
Okay,
And
so
I think
we've
Phil
talked.
made a good point before too, real quickly, about the like I have the ability to make this lethal intent move and do all these extra moves, but I can't do it with all my units in my army. It's just one unit is moving one normal move at the end of your turn. One unit is spending a token to do a reactionary move. So like you said, if you can like heavy pressure the list, I can't do this with every single unit on all my guys at all times. I have to pick and choose one of them. So if you can really pressure me on multiple flanks and multiple spots at once, I'm gonna have to pick and choose, and I still only have so many units in my army, and the MSUs, you'll be able to kill them pretty quickly if you can get to a lot of them fast enough.
So interesting. So we've talked about devoted to Drukhari and just how good this detachment can be. You have so many tools and tricks, but one of the detachments that you've been running up until this point, Reaper's Wager, you still value really highly. Can you give us like a short synopsis for individuals that are like, I still like more pure-esque Drukhari,
Absolutely.
maybe where you feel they stand, Reaper's Wager specifically, in the ranking of Drukhari detachments?
Yeah, so I will say right now, I think Reaper's Wager is the best Drukhari detachment. Yeah, I think it's the best Drukhari detachment because Sky Splinter losing the Tantalus was a hit, in my opinion, for that detachment. Running the full court was really strong in the Sky Splinter, which is, you can't do that anymore. But yeah, Reaper's Wager I think is the best Drukhari one. The detachment rule is not the best. It allows you to reroll ones on both sides for whatever faction is losing the wager. So it's between Harlequins and Drukhari. They're like fighting a little fight. Whatever unit killed the enemy unit last, the other unit's losing, and it kind of just goes back and forth. It's really good on the Harlequin units. Rerolling ones on both sides for like a troop unit in my last GT ended up being quite effective and really good. But troop went up 25 points. That's a pretty big hit for just an elf infantry unit that's T3. It's a lot of points. So in the new version of the Reaper's Wager, we end up actually just going no Harlequin at all. And I say that because the stratagems in Reaper's Wager are really good. We have Advance and Charge for 1 CP. Awesome for Drukhari. Drukhari need to get in. They want to get into melee. That's for any single unit. Beast packs, love it. Talos, love it. I mean, anything loves it, but beast packs really like it because they innately reroll charges and stuff like that. We have another stratagem that's lethal hits or sustained hits in any phase. Drukhari have pain tokens. We're one of the only armies in the game that has this expendable token that lets any one of our units just fully reroll hits. So good. So when we give a unit lethal hits or sustained hits and we're fully rerolling hits, we can fish. And it lets our little T3 guys that are just not normally punch up with lethal hits and full rerolls. Like Lilith and Witches have like 30 attack or like 40 something attacks with lethal hits and rerolls. Like I'm gonna get a lot of attacks in with AP3. Like that's gonna hurt. Same with like the birds and stuff like that. So Drukhari pain tokens with that stratagem specifically, like talk about glass cannon. You kill a lot of stuff in that detachment. That's why I love Reaper's Wager, is because um it just feels like throughout the entire course of the game, as long as you have 1 CP in your back pocket, you can just give as long as you have 1 CP and 1 pain token like available, you can give any one of your units lethal hits or sustained and a pain token, and they could just do some work into either punching up or punching down. Lethal hits up, sustained down. So the army just has very good damage output throughout the whole game, and you can really leverage that with like weighted dice units like Lilith with the Witches, Court of the Archon, Cabalite, big brick like that. I talk a lot about the beast packs, but there's a lot of attacks in that unit. So weighted dice units like that, love it. The bomber, he loves like sustained hits with his 12 attacks, shooting into like split firing his strength 8 AP4 damage 2 shots with the pain token. So really good damage output. 1 CP, no Overwatch. So we mentioned how good no Overwatch is with the Elder stuff. We have to spend a CP for it, but still, I mean, it's still the fact that you can no Overwatch a unit is so, so, so good. Like I said, Drukhari have really killer units. So if we can get our units, and we're elves, so Overwatch and Drukhari units is very lethal. We really want our court to get in with full strength. We really want the witches and Lilith to get in with full strength and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a really good one. There's another one that's -1 to be wounded in any phase, or maybe it's -1 to be hit. I have to double check, but let me pull that one up real quick. Drukhari here real fast. Reaper's Wager. Do I not use this one often? Fight phase, subtract 1 to the hit roll. Okay, so I don't use this one too often because we usually have I run a lot of fights first units, so I'm usually, and with Killy. So there's usually not too much attacks coming back into us in the fight phase too often. But yeah, another one -1 to hit, that's okay. That's good on like Talos and like the more durable units. And then fight on death for 2 CP, that's okay. Oh, sorry, fight on death for 1 CP. But it's on a 4+, so that's like all right. And then we have a 2 CP reactionary move. But really, it's the sustained hits, lethal hits. It's just a good suite of stratagems: advance and charge, and the no overwatch. Those 3 I use, like, I'm spamming those 3 stratagems if I can. And then the other ones are just if I have extra CP. And then, like I said before, the pain tokens plus the ability to use those 3 stratagems in combination with just Drukhari's Killy weighted dice units, you can kill. There's very few armies in the game that you can't break through even their most durable units, if that makes sense. Some of the things that Drukhari struggle into are like like 2+ saves with invulns. Can get a little bit weird if they also have armor contempt, because we have a lot of weighted dice, but it's usually like AP1 and AP2. So if we can't push them into their invulns, it gets a little bit dicey sometimes. But that's what I say is only like the weird situation. But yeah, I think Drukhari and Reaper's Wager, great spot, very killy. Good movement because Drukhari units naturally move far with elves. So like the infantry move 7 base, you get them advance and charge. That's nice if you can stage them correctly. Beast packs move really far. Bombers move good. The transports move far. So great movement. No overwatch, advance and charge, and yeah, all that stuff. It's just a nice little good suite of things to leverage. A nice little toolbox.
Yeah, that's all very nice to use for those Drukhari purists that really aren't ready to embrace the ways of the Ynnead. One last thing, I'd like to touch on. You've had a really good rise over the last year. Just getting into competitive. What would you say for other players who play some more of these glass cannony armies? We've talked about practice, obviously, but more of a tip really centered around these glass cannon armies. How would you coach some of those players and help them really understand some of the concepts that have gotten you to where you're at?
So that's a good question. So I think one of the most important things for me with Drukhari initially was really understanding how to leverage, like you said, we're glass cannon army. So when I use my Court of the Archon unit with my full court unit, the 15-model court unit, and I use my Lilith with the witches, those are like my 2 hammer units. And then I have like some Talos as like the backbone. I have the beast packs to hit. Those are like my 2 killy units, if that makes sense. Like a lot of weighted dice. I'm very confident that when they go into something, they're going to pretty much kill what they need to, if that makes sense. So those type of units that are very killy and also just die through swift breeze, I think the biggest thing is you have to really make sure you're just getting the most value out of them. Like if I'm charging my 10-man Lilith and Witch unit into 5 spiders on an objective, like 4 spiders on an objective, that's not good. I'm killing a 95, and I know for sure right after that they're gonna die, like because they're elves and T3 elves. So I want to be charging that Lilith unit into like another, like the enemy's hammer infantry unit, or if I can't get into the hammer infantry unit, I want to be like double charging into like 2 or 3 things, and then maybe piling into something after that. So these glass and like my Court of the Archon unit, they're hyper killy in both shooting and melee. So whenever I'm deciding to commit my Court of the Archon unit out into the open, or like just commit them into something, I really try to make sure I'm like in the shooting phase, getting all of the infantry weapons into a good infantry target out in the distance, getting the Dark Lance and the Blaster into like a tank or a transport or a monster somewhere else, like splitting those 2 things off, and then also charging into the closest target, like almost trying to 3-for-1 them in a turn if I can, every single time, like really maximize the damage with these hammer units. Because if I'm just charging my 15-man core unit into a Rhino and popping the Rhino, it's going to for sure pop the Rhino, but then I'm just killed a 75-point Rhino and I'm going to get shot at and lose it next. I have to really leverage my hammer units because they die so easily next turn. So you just have to make sure you're getting the most value out of them. You're not always, I'm not saying like every single game I'm going to 3-for-1 my court into something. Like obviously that's like unrealistic, but you have to try to like put them into a position and set up the board state so that you're getting as much value out of them as you can, if that makes sense.
So stage, right? You
Staging
know,
is
make
super
sure
important, especially with
and
glass cannon. Yeah.
yeah, and make sure not only those hammer units are staged well, you need to make sure your trash is staged well so they can deal with the other things out on the
Yeah.
board.
Or
Um,
even using the trash to screen for your hammer units. You know, there's like a lot of layers to this, of course. But I'm just saying, like, you have to really make sure you're getting the most value out of your hammer units, and that means leveraging the other parts of your armies as well to like screen for them, block the opponent's kill unit so that you can move your court out to kill something and not get shot at. You know, stuff like, all these different scenarios that can come up. But as a glass cannon army, you don't have the luxury of just making mistakes, if that makes sense. Like, you really get punished for making mistakes. Like, oh, I put my court out a little too early and oof, they whiffed and didn't kill something. That sucks because probably gonna lose them next turn, and now you're gonna be in a really rough spot that you lost one of your hammer units and they didn't get their value back. Yeah, because anything that you commit out, it's pretty easy to kill.
yeah, I think that's great advice, Phil.
Yeah. Like for those that are like, man, that just sounds like get good. Like that sounds like be better at the game. I promise you it is not. It is a fundamental part of the game that is super relevant. So,
Actually, something really quickly about that something that really changed the way I play glass cannon armies, Drukhari specifically. This was a really big turning point for me last year, and I forgot to mention it last time. Scurry at one point, he's like the best Drukhari guy in the world. He had mentioned that to be really effective with Drukhari, specifically, and I guess, that carries over to all glass cannon armies, you have to overcommit into units, if that makes sense. If I'm committing just my one court unit into their hammer unit, that that probably is not enough, just one unit into one unit, if that makes sense. Like, I have to layer enough things into a unit to make sure I'm actually killing something. Because, especially as Drukhari, if we don't actually get the kill, we don't get our paint tokens back. So if you're just throwing paint tokens out and then you're not actually fully wiping units, then you're going to be in a really bad spot once you have no more paint tokens. So you have to really line up, like, a couple of units into multiple targets. Like, really overlapping units into multiple things is extremely important. That really changed my way that I played glass cannon armies. It's not just sending my court out into one unit and being hoping that's fine. It's like, hey, I'm going to charge this unit with Lilith and Witches, and I'm also going to have my court here to shoot into them first to weaken them a bit, and also a Talos to flame them a little bit beforehand, so that I make sure when my Lilith and Witches go in, they actually do get the kill, and not just like, I'm hoping they get the kill. Stuff like that. It's just like layering your things up. Or like, I'm putting two Scourge units into one tank because I really want to make sure, like, both Scourges have line of sight into it to kill it, because I'm not confident that like four Dark Lances might do it, even though they probably could. There's always a chance that it might not happen. So just like layering multiple of your units to hit the same targets to just make sure they die is really important for glass cannon armies. Any army, really. Obviously, overcommitting, like making sure things die, I think is really important in 40k.
that's really good. And I think it ties into exactly what I'm going to talk about in terms of like when we say like you have to be very careful and you have to trade well, that means like using terrain well, right? So instead of charging out onto that middle objective, right, to kill that unit that's out there, and maybe it's the difference between that and allowing yourself to be charged with that fight's first unit, but now they're behind the terrain on the other side, and now even if they do survive after the fight's first, you can punish them without exposing things to get in a
Yeah,
position
stuff,
to do
yeah.
it, right? Like how are you attacking your natural versus their natural? There are a lot of lanes of access, and using the terrain to be like, I don't like, I can't turn off Overwatch, but I can only do it on one unit. So am I super careful with the units that I'm actually going to use as a threat to go forward? And if I don't have to use the 1 CP no Overwatch strat or the no Overwatch token with the new Eldar codex,
Yeah,
right? Am I just
exactly.
throwing units out there because like, oh, I know I can just be like one token, no Overwatch. That's not something I have to think about.
That
Well,
actually, literally, basically, it was the final game of the last GT where I lost against the Green Tide. I had my troop unit lined up to charge into some flash gits, and I got cocky, and I was like, let me just throw my troop unit right in front of them to get my melters off. When I could have leveraged the terrain, stood behind the wall, and got a 6-inch charge without being overwatched, and I had used my CP on my core to not be overwatched, so I wasn't even thinking straight. Do my troop out, and they got overwatched, and I lost like 90% of them. But a great point is like I could have just set up a 6-inch charge, probably fail it, maybe, who knows, or make it, but at least I wouldn't have gotten overwatched, and I still would have had my full troop behind a wall and not just like just shot in an overwatch, which was a very risky play, and I did end up losing like 75% of them or 80% of them. It was a really big hit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, and that's one of those things that we are definitely going to be covering in the trading video that we do release, and tons of more situations on how to handle them, whether you're melee, whether you're shooting, what kind of trash you're bringing along. We are probably going to get this wrapped up. We've been running a little long here. Phil, any closing thoughts?
Nick, really appreciate you coming on, especially talking about the new detachment. There is so much stuff in there, and I think we covered a lot in terms of like what a player needs to watch out for. So if you do have the opportunity, make sure you get games in to devote it to Ynnead or devote it to Drukhari, because they got the tools, they got the spice. You need to be prepared and you need to be cognizant because this army plays 40K in a way that we have not seen before.
Awesome. Well, again, yeah, thanks for coming on, Nick. And don't forget, victory isn't given, it's forged. And we'll see you next time here on Mastercrafted.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.